One of my favorite games of all time is Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube. Pretty recently I was replaying the game and I noticed something that I didn't before, and it's a pretty obvious thing. Luigi's Mansion has a huge shift in focus that other Mario games do not, and that's the combat. Before Luigi's Mansion there was Super Mario 64, which was a launch title for, obviously, the N64. When Super Mario 64 came out, it was praised for being innovative and revolutionary for the time. And it still is talked about today for being one of the best 3D Mario games. So knowing all of this and getting all of these praises, Nintendo made a very interesting play. Their launch title for their next console, the GameCube, was oddly enough a Luigi game. And no, it wasn't a platformer, it was a game all about combat. Right from the box art you can tell this isn't going to be your typical Mario game. I mean, you have a scared Luigi with a bunch of ghosts like Scoogly Man, Juiceper, Boom Bamberly Sr., and Yellow Guy. In all seriousness, it was definitely a strange move on their part, but I think it worked and I wanted to focus on this game and its shift in focus. In Luigi's Mansion, right from the start you'll notice that it's very dark and there is no jump button. Instead, the A button just calls out for Mario. But these are all obvious things, but as soon as you get the Poltergust 3000, almost every room you go into is full of ghosts that you have to suck up. In another Mario game like Super Mario 64, the enemies are more of an obstacle that you can easily just avoid. But in Luigi's Mansion, you have to clear each room of either normal enemies or a boss. And that's another thing, the bosses. In the game, there are 19 bosses and 4 arena bosses, so in total that is 23 bosses. A few of those bosses are optional, but that's still a total of 23. Compare that again to Super Mario 64, which only had 8 boss fights. Even if you include all the rematches, that's still only 12. As you can see, they were only an afterthought, but bosses were a huge focus in Luigi's Mansion. The only way to progress in this game is through finding the ghosts and lining up the darkened rooms and fighting the bosses. In this game there are 3 categories of ghosts. You have the normal enemy ghosts that usually have around 10 to 40 health and are pretty easy to defeat. Just shine your light on them and you're good to go. And then there are the bosses who are a bit trickier to catch. You can't just shine your light on them. If you do, they usually just disappear. You have to do a little puzzle source in order to find the weakness and start to suck them up. Take for example the first boss, the father. You can't just shine your light on him, you have to look away and wait for him to yawn. During this, that's when his heart is exposed and you can start going all Ghostbuster on his ass. Another example is the second boss, the mother. If you pay attention you can tell that she's obsessed with her hair and is always trying to make it perfect. And again, if you pay attention, you can tell one of the curtains is moving. Once you make the connection, you move the curtains, letting the draft in, and that's when you attack. They always have about 100 health. And finally, they have what I call arena bosses. These bosses are much bigger and have a lot more pizzazz going on with them. Think of them as the final boss of each area. When you beat them, they give you a key which unlocks the next area of the mansion. The reason I call them arena bosses is because during the fight, they take you to an arena type area. The first one you fight is the baby. He teleports to a bigger version of his crib or something like that. Again, they have about 100 health. Just like any other game with a huge focus on combat and bosses, Luigi's Mansion has a good variety. Let's take a quick look at Dark Souls. In this game, there are obviously going to be a lot of enemies, but each one of them are unique in not only their design, but in their actions. A bit of a warning, I have not played a Dark Souls game, so if I say something stupid or incorrect, now you know. Anyway, moving on. In Dark Souls, the enemies in this game are ruthless. Each one has different attack patterns and some of them never seem to give you a break. But none of them are ever really used more than once. Each kind of enemy either has a different weapon or a different method of attacking, or like I said before, have different attack patterns. And they're very violent. If you get too close to one of them, they will go after you and will try to kill you. In Luigi's Mansion, you could argue the ghosts are similar. When you go into a room, the ghosts aren't hiding or running away. No. They are appearing from behind you and are very hostile towards you. The purple punchers will do as their name implies. They will try to punch you and with each successful hit, do 10 damage. And just like Dark Souls, there is a variety with the enemies. There are ghosts that attack by slamming the ground, there are ghosts that try to hug you to death, and there are ghosts that leave banana peels on the floor for you to slip on. There's even a room where you have to use the mirror to fight them since they are invisible normally. It may be weird to compare Dark Souls enemies to Luigi's Mansion enemies, but I hope you see what I'm getting at. As for the bosses, I want to take a look at one of my favorite games of all time, Shadow of the Colossus. Again, I know it's a bit weird to compare these two games, but just hear me out. In Shadow of the Colossus there are no enemies, just the 16 bosses you have to go hunt down and kill. And with a game that focuses on bosses, they should be well designed and be difficult to take down. And they are. Just take a look at the first boss, Valus. You just have to sneak up on him and jump on his back leg and start stabbing at him. Once you do that, he'll fall and you can start climbing him to get to his head. He's meant to teach you the mechanic of climbing the Colossus and finding their weak points. Now let's look at the next boss, Quadratus. In order to even start climbing him, you have to shoot the bottom of his feet, and when he falls, that's when you start to climb. Now, what am I getting at? I'm trying to show you that Shadow of the Colossus focuses on two things, diversity and challenge. Now I know you're thinking that there's already a problem because Luigi's Mansion is not a hard game, and you're right. But let's forget about that and let's focus on diversity. With this being such a big mansion, you would imagine there would be a lot of rooms, and there are. There's a dining room, the ballroom, and the butler's room. And each room has a boss that fits that room. The dining room has a fat, gluttonous man constantly eating, the ballroom has a couple that always dances, and the butler's room obviously has the butler. Now for all three it's the same thing, just suck them up until their health reaches 0. But how you even start doing that is always different. Just like Shadow of the Colossus, for every boss it's the same. Climb the enemy, find the weak point, and stab them. But how you even start climbing them is always different. For the Eater, in order to reveal his heart, you have to vacuum up all his food. He'll start to get so angry that he'll start to shoot fireballs at you. But soon he'll tire himself out, and that's when you start to make your move. For the dancers, just look away from them and spin with them on the spinning platforms. Wait for the man to take a bow and start sucking them up. And for the butler, when you unlock the fire element, go out into the hallway and light his candelabra and he'll go running into his room. See? Diversity. Not one ghost is taken down the same way. Except for maybe Nana and the pool guy, but other than that they're different. And unlike any other kind of game that Nintendo normally makes, this game has multiple endings. Yeah, it's not a huge thing, nor are the different endings that drastic, but it's still interesting to see this game take that approach. I know that all the ending does is change the size of the mansion you get, but it also gives you a rating of A all the way down to H. In H, all you're left with is a tent, but with A, you get a huge manor with the letter L on it. It's pretty cool to see the game give you a ranking on how well you did on exploring the mansion and collecting money. It really does add some replayability to the game. Luigi's Mansion wasn't the kind of game most Nintendo fans were looking for, and the attacks this game got at the time were pretty harsh, but now it has gotten the appraisal it deserves, and Luigi's Mansion is easily one of my favorite games of all time.